Welcome to Eastown Online. My name is Clint Dupin, and we are so excited that you chose to be with us today. It's Easter, right? It is Easter, and we are so thankful for today. Today's kind of a big deal, right? When it comes to Jesus and when it comes to Christianity and the church, it's like why we exist, right? There would be nothing else. There'd be no other reason if it was not for Easter. And so we're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a few moments. But before I do that, I just want to say thank you again for joining us. If you've been watching online for a few months now and you've never checked in with us, maybe today is the day that you can check in. We would love to connect with you. We would love to send you a gift just to say thank you for connecting with us. If you just simply text Easttown to 94000, we will connect with you. And then also, I just want to say this. We are getting ready to start a brand new series next week, right, called Creatures of Habit. And we're going to kick that off. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then also on May 1st is our celebration of baptisms. And that is kind of a big deal to us here at Easttown. It's where people say, hey, you know what? I realize that Jesus is the Lord of my life, and I want to make a public declaration of that. And that's something that defines us as followers of Jesus. It's kind of like a symbol, right, of that inward commitment that you've chosen to follow Jesus. So if you want to know more about baptism, if you want to sign up and be with us in person, it's on May 1st. You can just simply look at our app. Make sure you download it first, Easttown Church app, and you can sign up for it that way, or you can simply go to our website, easttown.church. So let's get started today. One of my favorite movies is A Star is Born, and it's got two great characters in this movie. And one of those characters is played by Bradley Cooper, and the other one is Lady Gaga. And it kind of starts off with showing Lady Gaga's character in this place where she just really didn't want to end up being, but that's kind of where her life has taken her. And it's kind of like this broken dream scenario, right? It's like she had high hopes for her life, but life just kind of dealt her a few punches and blows, and she just kind of gave up. And then all of a sudden, this person, this character, Bradley Cooper's character, who is just as broken, comes into her life, and he's this super mega star entertainer, and he sees something different in her. He sees the beauty, not just on the outside, but on the inside as well. And he begins to pick up those broken pieces and makes her whole again. And if you've never seen the movie, I would just invite you to watch it. It's really, really good. And it kind of just sends her upward, right? It's like she becomes this amazing entertainer. But he's able to see that which is broken and make it whole again. And he's consistently telling her how beautiful she is and the gifts that she has. And kind of as he does that, she kind of just picks up those broken pieces and able to become whole again. I think the same thing is true with us, isn't it? We enter into this world whole with everything that we actually need, that we are enough. We really are enough, right? And we have what it takes, and we are loved, right, for the most part. But then life just kind of robs us of those things, right? It kind of just pulls the pieces away from us, and before long, we're just kind of just existing because of all maybe the wake that we have left in our past, or the hurts and the pains and the regrets that we have. It's kind of like Mr. Potato Head here, isn't it? It's right. When we're born, we have everything that we need, right? We enter in this world, we have everything. Because you think about when you're young, when you're like 3 years old, you're not like dealing with anxiety or fear. And when you grow older, right, maybe you're 4 or 5, it's like you're not thinking, about your next career move. We're not thinking about, our likes on our social media feed. It's like we have everything that we need. And then you think about it, you enter into elementary school. I can still remember the day that I entered into elementary school, and the first time that I heard that my glasses weren't cool or that something was wrong with me. And I thought up until that point, nothing's wrong. I had these thick glasses, right? And it's like, what happens is it was just kind of like this piece is just left on the floor. It's kind of just who we are is taken off, and You think about when you enter into high school or middle school and we find out that we just don't fit in like we should. And it's just like another piece is kind of taken and it kind of just lays there on the floor. Or maybe you remember high school and it kind of reminds you of the in crowd or the out crowd, and you're not invited to that party, or you're not asked out on a date, and it's just like just another piece, like just another reminder that you're just not whole. Maybe it's that you just don't get into the college that you wanted to get into, and it's like before long, it's like you've kind of forgotten who you are, and you move into your career and it just doesn't take off like it should, and before long, it's just kind of like you're just roaming around, you're existing around, and you're just a kind of a shell of who you used to be. Now, and we're just kind of maybe even just trying to keep it together, and we look down and we just see all of these different parts just laying there. And we look at our brokenness and think, there's just no way to move forward. So what do? Often what we try to do is we try to find things that will actually fill us up. This is kind of the danger zone, isn't it? Because we're kind of roaming around and we're trying to seek that which will fill us up. And it just, what does it do? It kind of just lets us feel emptier than we just did before. And the world has a way of robbing us of who we really are, who we were made to be. And the last thing we feel is whole. This is the part I love about Easter. It offers something, doesn't it? It's not just something, it actually offers a person that can take that which was broken and make it whole again. Because here's the truth about Jesus. Jesus never wastes a pain or a hurt or a past regret. He actually uses it. And going back to the movie analogy at the very beginning, it's like all of those painful moments in her life, she was actually able to take and use them for good. This is the same thing that Jesus does. So I want to share with you just a brief part of the Easter story. Now, this man, this person that I'm referring to, Jesus, was claiming to be the Messiah, the Son of God, which the nation of Israel was waiting for. His words and deeds led people to believe that he was more than just a pastor or just this wise person or prophet, that this man could possibly be the one that they were waiting for. The movement grew. People began to chatter about Jesus, like they wanted to see Jesus. They began to put their hope in their dreams, in their faith in this Savior that was making them whole. And then he was taken away. He was killed. And then he was buried, and he was gone. Now, can you imagine how these people must have felt? Is that this person who entered into their life began to breathe hope, give them some eternal and living perspective, and now he is gone. So this is where we pick up the story. It's after Jesus is buried and he's lying in the tomb, in the grave. So we look at John chapter 20. We're going to look at John chapter 20. We find John in the New Testament. And John was one of the youngest disciples of Jesus, and he would write about what he experienced when he followed Jesus. So this is kind of a first-hand perspective of who Jesus was. And so we look at the book of John. It says, early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene went to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the entrance. So she came running to Simon Peter, which Peter would have been the head of all the disciples, and the other disciple, the one Jesus loved, and said, they have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him. So Peter and the other disciple started for the tomb. Both were running before the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. Don't know why that's necessary other than he could run a 4:40. But anyways, then Simon Peter came along behind him and went straight into the tomb. He saw the strips of linen lying there, as well as the cloth that had been wrapped around Jesus' head. The cloth was still lying in its place, separate from the linen. Finally, the other disciple who had reached the tomb first also went inside. He saw and believed. They still did not understand from Scripture that Jesus had to rise from the dead. Can you imagine how they must have felt, right? Then the disciples went back to where they were staying. They were hiding out, right? They were scared to death. And Mary stood on the outside of the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, which is, I just want to pause here, is like, this is like props to the women, right, in this story. If any, I just want to pause here, is like, you notice who showed up at the tomb first. It was the women. You notice who brought the good news back to those who were hiding. They were scared to death. They were thinking about their lives. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were not thinking about that whatsoever. They were given the responsibility to share the good news before anyone else. This is beautiful. Now, Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over and looked in the tomb and saw two angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head, one at the foot. They asked this woman, "Why are you crying?" "They have taken my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they have put him." At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. He asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it that you are looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." And Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Now, it's beautiful. You can read about this in all different parts of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. I love this version because it really focuses on the person of Mary, and that's what I want to do right now. So I want to pull just a few truths from this resurrection passage. And like I said before, I want to focus a little bit on Mary in this story, but more importantly, what does this mean for us? What does the resurrection mean for our lives? And there's a few truths that I want to look at here. And the first one I want to point out is that Jesus sees us. What do I mean by that? Prior to this event, Mary and Jesus had a very significant interaction, right? It was more than just interaction. And I want to give you a little context of who Mary was and why this really matters. Now, it's important to understand that Mary went all in on Jesus, right? It's like all her chips were in on this person of Jesus. This was her whole world. She saw her Savior now crucified and buried, and now even in his death, there is no closure. He's gone, right? And so why did this mean so much to her? So I want to look here in Luke chapter 8, verse 1. This is kind of where we see Mary show up on the scene, or she's talked about just a little bit. After this, Jesus traveled about from one town and village to another, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom of God. The 12 were with him, and also some women. So Mary was actually a part of the followers of Jesus. She would have been a disciple of Jesus. And also some women who had been cured of the evil spirits and diseases. Mary, called Magdalene, from whom 7 demons came out of. So many scholars believe that Mary was dealing with some major mental illness, most likely anxiety or depression and fear, and most likely had developed other diseases for the reasons of not being able to take care of herself. And most likely there were men that were taking advantage of Mary. Mary was the least of these. People would have just forgotten about Mary. Nobody really saw Mary. And here comes this rabbi, this teacher, this respected man, Jesus. He comes along and he sees Mary. He doesn't just acknowledge her, right? He sees her. He sees her pain. He sees her past, her lack of dignity, and he chooses to heal her, right? He didn't just acknowledge her and say, "Oh man, I'm so sorry. Can I pray for you?" He heals her and makes her whole again. Mary's whole world is turned upside down, and she chooses to follow Jesus. Now, I just want to pause here. It's like maybe you have felt like Mary. Maybe you've felt not seen, right? It's like, nobody sees me, right? Like something is now wrong with you, right? Now, have you ever felt not seen? If you have never felt not seen, I'll tell you where you can go to feel not seen. Go down to the local DMV, give it about 5 minutes, and you will feel like the least of these, right? It's like you won't be seen. It doesn't matter what age you are. The world is an equal opportunity offender when it comes to not seeing people. Now, maybe you are older and you feel like the world is just kind of passing you by. Your family is kind of moving on without you. Your career has kind of come and gone. You've missed that opportunity. People just kind of look over you. Jesus sees you. He sees you. Maybe those of you who are still looking for that significant other, that relationship in your life, you've been single or you've been divorced for quite some time, and it just doesn't seem to be happening for you. You are lonely and even maybe depressed. You wake up the next morning only to feel the same way. Jesus knows your pain. Jesus sees you. And in fact, in Matthew chapter 26, listen to what Jesus says. He says, look at the birds, free and unfettered, right? Not tied down to some job description, careless in the care of God. And you count far more to him than birds, right? You matter more than birds, right? You know that God even cares about cats. Did you know that? He cares about them. He even cares about the birds. If he cares about those things, he cares about you. Jesus didn't say to Mary, hey, get yourself cleaned up. Here's some next step programs that you need to do first, and then you can come follow me. It's like, no, Jesus sees her. Jesus sees you. He cares about your pain. He reaches out and holds your hand and walks you through that mess, walks you through the healing process, understands every single painful event you have been through. I don't understand it. Some of you that are watching or experiencing this right now, you have gone through some major pain. You have actually allowed it to set you back because you feel like you don't deserve. The story of Mary here reminds us that we do deserve it. That our past regrets, our past mistakes, and our pain and the hurts that have been caused to us and inflicted on us is that Jesus knows it and he invites you to the table. Jesus invites us to more. That's the next thing that we see in this little passage is Jesus invites us to more. Look at this in verse 15. He says, he asked her, woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for? Jesus is always speaking like metaphorically, right? He's asking the literal question, but he's asking us to think on a different level. There's something else that is going on here. There's another perspective that says this in a different passage in the book of Luke. It says, why are you looking among the dead for someone who is alive? Now, this had to be a startling moment, right, for these women. For someone to ask this question, the whole time thinking they were going to be visiting this dead body, right? It's like they were coming to visit to put these spices that was customary to do this to this body. That which was supposed to be there is now gone. I think you would agree with me that these past 2 years has been a little like this. Everything has kind of been turned upside down. Friends and even family that 2 years ago that you would have said, these are my ride or die people, right? I will be with these people all the way to the grave, right? And now there's virtually no relationship. It's kind of left us spinning and speechless. And we have searched for meaning, right? And happiness in this season. It's been crazy in this season. It's that we've actually turned away from the outside and we're looking inside and we're trying to find that happiness and we're trying to discover things that will bring us more joy. And it's just kind of left us empty, right? is that vacation hasn't done what you thought it would do. That job hasn't done what you thought it was going to do. That house hasn't brought the expectations that you thought that it was going to bring you. And yet we still come up empty. Jesus is asking you the same question. Why are you looking for the living among the dead? Why are you trying to find fulfillment in something that I have already showed you and told you will not bring fulfillment? What we thought would unlock this door of emptiness and loneliness just ends up leaving us more empty. Now, Jesus invited Mary and his other followers to something more, to something eternal. He's asking a bigger question there by the tomb. He's saying, hey, there's more to this world than what's happening here on this earth. There is an eternal perspective. There is something that is lasting. This invitation is to you as well. What is it that you are putting your faith and hope in? And maybe the question is this: can it offer you living hope? Now maybe what you're pursuing is good. Maybe what you're putting your hopes and dreams into are something that brings you temporary happiness, or it's like, hey, it brings me some sort of joy, but it doesn't have an eternal perspective, right? It's like the only guarantee we really have, my friend always says this, the only guarantee we have is death and taxes, right? It's like one day we are going to die. We're going to die. You're like, Clint, this is supposed to be a happy Easter message. One day we're going to die. The things that we acquire on this earth are left behind. Why do we search for the living among those things? Why do we search for those things to bring us joy when really it's going to be nothing soon? He says, put your hope in something eternal, right? Hope that isn't deterred by external circumstances. That's the living hope. The last thing we see here in this, that a truth, is Jesus brings peace, right? He brings peace. I love this little part of verse 16. It says, Jesus said to her, Mary, right? All he had to say is Mary. I can't imagine what Mary felt in this moment. Just 2 days before, even 2 hours before, all of her hopes and dreams are gone. Her peace was destroyed. All those shattered pieces that she was able to redeem and to restore while following Jesus are now kind of just back on the floor, right? And now he is alive, right? He conquers death. He's sitting there in that graveyard and he says the word Mary, and it meant so many things to her. And it rushed in, this peace just rushed back into her life. He conquers death. The presence of Jesus in that garden changed absolutely everything. Fear is gone. She can now experience peace. I think it is important to know that Mary knew Jesus. She didn't just know about Jesus. She put her trust and hope in him, right? She knew his character. Jesus not only extended his hand to Mary in the lowest moments of her life, but he held it through the storms of her life as well. He knew that pain. And here's the truth. If you don't know the person that is holding your hand, then you really don't know peace. Peace is a person, and his name is Jesus. And what do I mean by that? It's like, maybe for some of you, and this is just maybe a certain category of people, it's like you're a Christian, you go to church, but you don't have peace. You might have some comfort items in your life. You might experience some happiness, but the hand that you're holding is not the hand of Jesus. The hand that you're holding is your hand, or the hand that you're holding is a hand that really the thing could go away at any different time. Maybe for some of you, it's time to put your trust in your hope and surrender to the person of Jesus today. Peace is a person, right? It's not determined by a circumstance. It's not necessarily a choice that I make. It's a person that I choose to follow. And there's no circumstance that can rob me of that peace. But all throughout history of those who have chosen to follow Jesus, no matter how bad their circumstances were, maybe some major injustices where maybe it was slavery or it was in the death camps or any of those things, you read stories about people who had peace because they had put their faith in a person, and that person was Jesus. Because here's the thing, Jesus defeats death. He defeated death itself. She and the other followers could live with nothing to lose. Peace is not the absence of conflict. It's the presence of a person. Because once you read more into Scripture, the church started after this moment, and you will see conflict after conflict, right? Death after death. But still, they were able to experience peace because of the presence of Jesus and the person of Jesus. I close with this scripture, then I want to show you this story. In 1 Corinthians, it says this, "Now let me ask you something profound yet troubling. If you became believers because you trusted the proclamation that Christ is alive, risen from the dead, how can you let people say that there is no such thing as a resurrection? If there's no resurrection, there's no living Christ. And face it, if there's no resurrection for Christ, everything we've told you is smoke and mirrors, and everything you've staked your life on is smoke and mirrors. Not only that, but we would be guilty of telling you a string of barefaced lies about God. All these affidavits we passed on to you, verifying that God raised up Christ, sheer fabrication if there's no resurrection." That author is Paul, and he was willing to give his life for this message because Jesus defeated death. And these truths that I shared with you today are truths that you can possess in your own life. I want to show you the story of Dylan because Dylan kind of struggled with some of those same things that life was throwing at him, and he had these pieces on the ground, but because of his discovery of Jesus, the person of Jesus, something amazing happened in his life. Watch Dylan's story.
I've been drumming as long as I can remember. I got my first, kids drum set when I was, 2 or 3 or whatever. And I just beat that to just, mush. My brother is a musician. He's quite a bit older than me, but he would always beatbox and stuff. And I remember vividly as a kid that just sticking out, the sounds he can make and just how cool that was. The main reason I love teaching music, especially in elementary, I have to see every single kid in the whole school, whether they want to be there or not. And I love that because I love connecting with people, specifically young people. I really believe music is a vehicle of just religious things. There's something so mystical and magical about music that we don't even fully understand. And so being able to use music to share love and to get to know kids and let them know that they're loved, it's perfect. I was actually first introduced to alcohol in 8th grade by one of my best friends at my church. And he had a bottle of Smirnoff or something. And so we just drank a little bit in his fort. It was innocent, it was fun. I was very young to begin drinking alcohol. I really do believe that at least drinking with my buddies and smoking pot started just recreationally for fun. But then I think there's always had been something about me that I believed about myself, just I'm not quite good enough. I know this now because alcohol still does the same thing, that, kind of quiets that voice a little bit, of you're not good enough. When I was in high school, this might have been sophomore year, I remember my youth pastor, he was reading some of Jesus's words, and it was when he's talking about money. He says you can't serve both this world and God, essentially. And someone in the group asked, could that be for anything? You can't have two masters. It's either God or anything else. And he was like, yeah. And I remember thinking to myself, well, I already bought, my 5th of vodka for this weekend. So I guess I'm going to choose that. So I think just that little tiny disobedience, if you will, that like little decision, it kind of put me down a path. So painkillers got introduced to me probably in my sophomore year of high school. I was in a band with a guy, and he got pills by the 200s. But then I had many opportunities throughout high school to get painkillers, and they were just always my drug of choice, because even with pot, I would get kind of anxious. With alcohol, I don't know, get too woozy or too crazy, and painkillers were just so subtle. It's just like a warm hug. And that just, my brain just like locked onto that and just remembered how good of a feeling that was. There's nothing social about it. I mean, it was a very ritualistic thing. I'd have my thing to cut them and the crushing them and the smell of that, the smell of the dollar bill as I would like snort it. It was a very like kind of religious thing. After a while, I had to start taking more. You're just trying to get back to normal almost. And I just realized whenever I didn't have them, it was just like life just wasn't good. I didn't get to experience the hug. It just got really, really dark. Got really lonely. Really lonely. I remember driving up to my buddy's house, and I was gonna go buy it. And it hit me. I was just like hanging over this like dark pit. It was like this kind of like vision I had. I had just this feeling of either I can move on to heroin and die, or I can keep taking these and have my liver or whatever collapse and die. It's like those were my like two options in life. Like that's when I really understood the reality of hell. Like I saw into the pit. It was, oh man, it was a dark thing. I knew something was off when I went to college. One of the biggest issues was just, the hiddenness of it, the loneliness that came with it. I can't really say that it like actually damaged relationships because they didn't know, but you could also say that it did damage relationships because no one actually knew. No one knew me. So I got a text message from the pastor of the church I grew up in Benicia, and he wanted to get together for breakfast. And then I also got connected with a youth pastor at the church in St. Rafael, which is where I was living, and we started meeting regularly. I remember specifically the pastor of the church I grew up in. He really just was vulnerable with me. And I remember thinking like, wait, he's a pastor, but he still struggles with things. I didn't know that was possible. He showed me that you could be honest about yourself and still be loved. And as I just let my life be known to both of them, they just really showed me the love and the forgiveness and the grace and the mercy of God. And then with that, letting myself be known with these guys who taught me the way of Jesus, it's like, oh, I'm becoming like lighter. I'm becoming freer. And then being able to just like let myself be known with everybody, no matter who it was, because I had no one to impress anymore. It was still really hard. It was really, really hard, but my life was easy and it wasn't good. And so I was like, you know what, let's do this. It was almost like a challenge. I was ready for it. Kind of like as a musician, it takes some real discipline. If you want to be a better musician, you're gonna have to give up certain things, following Jesus is saying no to this and that, and to actually living life like free to the fullest. So something I realized through this whole process, through following Jesus, is we are created whole. But what sin does is it makes us really believe that we are not whole. There is something lacking, and that's exactly what I experienced. I experienced this lack. I wasn't fully myself. And I remember after becoming free from it, Even my dad, it's hard to get it out. So I feel like I got the old Dylan back. You know, and so I mean, there was something missing. So wholeness for me that I've experienced through Jesus is that I was once afraid to be known, because to be fully loved is to be fully known. And in that, I was able to be fully known and more loved than I could ever imagine.
Man, what an amazing story. I have loved just my relationship with Dylan and his honesty and his vulnerability of just the struggles that he has had in his life. And one of the coolest things about Dylan to this day, he'll still tell you, it's like, hey, I'm still working through stuff. I'm still a work in progress. This is what is so beautiful about Jesus, is that Jesus doesn't expect everything to be perfect in our lives in order to follow him. He doesn't expect us to get cleaned up in order to meet him. And in fact, I think our time here on earth, we're going to always be struggling. Or there's going to always be things in our life that we battle with. But here's the hope that we have. We have the hope in Jesus that we can live a different life, a life of freedom, just like Dylan's life. And I'll tell you, the enemy in this world will always be sure to put those things, those mistakes, those past regrets, those painful moments always in front of us. But the cool part about Jesus is that we now say, hey, you know what? I follow Jesus. Those have been paid for. Those are things in the past. In fact, those are going to be things that are going to be used in your story for something great. Because I have watched Dylan. I've watched people like Dylan all throughout my life. Those regrets, those painful moments, those mistakes, those places that were hidden in his life, when you drag those into the light, they're used for something good and powerful. You know, earlier I talked about baptism. This is what baptism is all about. Baptism doesn't say that we are perfect. Baptism is more about a symbol of saying, you know what? My life, I realize that Jesus has paid for my sins. I realize that my old life is gone. That's why we take people, we dunk them in the water. We're like, my old is gone and I'm new in Jesus. Because the cool part is like Jesus defeats death. He defeats our past. I want you to be thinking about that. What is your next step when it comes to following Jesus? Maybe today is the day, Easter Sunday, that you say, you know what? I'm going to follow Jesus because death has been arrested. And in fact, I want you to listen to the words of this song sang by April and Kendrick, Death is Arrested. And I want you to kind of contemplate, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for my life? And we'll come back right after that.
Alone in my sorrow and dead in my sin, lost without hope with no place to begin. Your love made a way to let mercy come in. When death was arrested and my life began, ash was redeemed, only beauty remained. And my orphan heart was given a name. My mourning grew quiet, my feet rose to dance. When death was arrested and my life began. Oh, your grace so free washes over me. You have made me new. Now life begins with you. Released from my chains, I'm a prisoner no more. My shame was a ransom he faithfully bore. He canceled my debt and he called me his friend. Oh, when death was arrested and my life began. Oh, your grace so free washes over me. You have made me new. Now life begins with you. It's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made me new. Now life begins with you. It begins with you. Our Savior displayed on a criminal's cross. And darkness rejoiced as though heaven lost. But then Jesus arose with our freedom in hand. That's when death was arrested and my life began. That's when death was arrested and my life began. Oh, oh, your grace so free washes over me. You have made me new. Now life begins with you. It's your endless love pouring down on us. You have made us new. Now life begins with you. Oh, we're free, free, forever we're free. Come join the song of all the redeemed. Yes, we're free, free, forever, amen. When death was arrested and my life began. When death was arrested and my life began. When death was arrested and my life began.
Wow, what a day. I just want to invite you, if you've been watching online and you're in the East Bay, I would challenge you to visit us. The one thing that I love about the church, not just Eastown, the church as a whole, is the community that it offers, right? It's like, I know for a lot of us that we are going through times that are really, really tough. And we can't do this alone. We need a community that is on mission together. And that's what I love about Eastown. So I want to continue to invite you out to do that. If you've made a decision to follow Jesus, we want to know about that. You can simply go to our Eastown app and just let us know that, or you can simply email me, clint@easttown.church. I would love to connect with you and talk more about what that means. And we would also love to send you something simple. It's called Following Jesus. What are my next steps now, right? What are my next steps now? So just like I said earlier, we are getting ready to kick off a brand new series next week called Creatures of Habit. Because, hey, let's be honest, following Jesus is one thing, but those habits kind of creep back in, whether it's pride, it's greed, it's worry or lust, any of those type of things. I'm going to be dealing with those topics in this next series. Hey, before we do that, I want to show you this. So many of you have been generous to Eastown. We are so thankful for your generosity. This is things that have happened over just the last 2 months here at Eastown. I want to give you kind of a glimpse of when you are generous here at Eastown. It's not just about what takes place on Sunday morning and online. We're making a difference in our community. Watch this. thank you for your generosity. If that's you today, you're ready to take your first step when it comes to generosity, you can simply go to online, easttown.church/give, or you can give through our app, GYVE. Just download that and choose Eastown. I'm just so thankful for your generosity. Again, thank you for being with us today. If you ever have any questions, just simply email info@easttown.church. God bless, and we'll see you next week.